Couple of things to talk about today. Unfortunate news about one of NASCAR's most historic and successful race teams, and we also have to talk about recent comments Daniel Suarez made about his time with Joe Gibbs Racing. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. I thought really hard about dividing today's episode into two separate videos, but no, I think we're all going to combine it into one. It's going to be one super packed episode. We're going to talk a lot about Roush, going to talk a lot about Joe Gibbs Racing, two of the most successful teams in NASCAR's history, and yeah, let's start with Roush. Earlier today, I saw it was reported on NASCAR Reddit that apparently Ty Majeski revealed during the Snowball Derby broadcast that Roush Fenway Racing is closing down its Xfinity Series race team. Last year, that team housed the number 16 driven by Ryan Reed and the number 60 that was driven by a couple drivers, including Ty Majeski. Ryan Reed was funded mainly by his partnership with Lilly Diabetes. It was announced a few weeks ago that Lilly Diabetes was leaving NASCAR, so Ryan Reed we've known for a while now, probably out of an Xfinity Series ride. But as far as we knew until this point, the 60 car was going to remain in operation, despite the ongoing running joke that, the 60 car wrecked in pretty much every race last year, it felt like. But Ty Majeski spilled the beans here. Apparently Roush Fenway is closing their Xfinity Series program, which honestly shouldn't come as a shock. It's honestly more surprising to me that they stayed in business as long as they did, but we'll talk about that. Roush Fenway Racing still has a 2-car Cup Series program. Next year, their drivers Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Ryan Newman. Obviously, this is a big blow to a team that has really been successful at all major levels of NASCAR for decades and decades now. To see their Xfinity Series program close up like this, is unfortunate. But like I said, it's not super surprising. With Lilly Diabetes leaving, they showed earlier in the year with the whole fiasco with Connor Daly that they wanted out of NASCAR. Losing them doesn't really reflect poorly on Roush, it just is the way it is. So kind of down to a single car team for next year. That 60 car, at least this last year in 2018, had maybe the worst year I've ever seen from a top Xfinity level team. And it wasn't necessarily because the equipment was bad. The equipment wasn't great. It was a 15th place car most weeks. But that car, no matter who was driving it, Cindric, Majeski, Briscoe, it wrecked so many times. The running joke that I'm sure most of y'all are aware of is that 60 car would bring out at least one yellow a week. Many people dubbed that the 60 car was cursed last year because of how many fenders it broke, how many wrecks it was involved with. That team could not have been financially viable. They didn't have a lot of outside sponsorship on that car. Roush was forced to fund a lot of that from his own pocket, which speaks to a larger sponsorship issue that Roush has dealt with for a few years now. So clearly, with as many wrecks as it was involved in last year, with a sort of revolving door of drivers, no real one to heavily commit towards, it is not surprising to me that Roush is closing that Xfinity Series team. I think it's a good move for them going forward. It seems like, by bringing in Matt Kenseth this last year and now putting Ryan Newman in the 6 car, that they really want to turn their focus to making that Cup Series team as good as it once was. Now, Roush Fenway Racing, many of us know the story. They have fallen hard over the last 15 years. Back-to-back Cup Series championships in 2003 and 2004, and then in 2005, half of the playoff field in the Cup Series were Roush drivers. They went from having a team with Kurt Busch, Matt Kenseth, Carl Edwards, Greg Biffle, Mark Martin. You look at that team, that might be 5 Hall of Famers right there. So they went from that, 13, 14 years ago to what we have here today, no more Xfinity Series program. That thing's now dead and gone. Truck Series program has been non-existent for who knows how long. Cup Series program, 2 cars. Neither of them made the playoffs this last year. It's really rough to see what's happened to Jack Roush's Ford, what once used to be a Ford powerhouse team in motorsports. The team really dropped off in 2015. They lost Matt Kenseth, who was their longest tenured driver at that point, after the 2012 season due to sponsorship issues. 2 years later, after 2014, they lost Carl Edwards. Both Kenseth and Edwards jumped ship to Joe Gibbs Racing, turned them into a super team. And at that point, Roush was left with a past his prime Greg Biffle trying to mentor drivers like Trevor Bayne and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Biffle's now gone after his own sponsorship issues, and you've been left the last 2 years with Trevor Bayne and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. basically underachieving. They brought back Matt Kenseth out of retirement last year to run a part-time schedule, seemed to have some really strong runs. He ended the year with 2 straight top 10s. But after Matt Kenseth apparently informed the team that he did not want to run full-time next year, the team went out and got Ryan Newman, another arguably past his prime driver, but a veteran nonetheless, who can hopefully come in and improve that team. It seems to me that all these moves, from closing the Xfinity team to bringing in Ryan Newman and earlier this year Matt Kenseth, points to the fact that Jack Roush is definitely going all in on improving that Cup Series program, which is a smart move in my opinion. The Xfinity program was going nowhere. Ryan Reed was going nowhere. You had a revolving door of drivers in that 60 car, and it didn't seem to matter who you put in it, that car was going to end up on a wrecker. To focus on your Cup Series program, a team that still has some sponsorship issues but is doing relatively well. Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s got pretty good deals from from 3 major companies, so that you're doing okay in the Cup Series side of things. I think it's smart for Roush to focus on that, and I think that's what this Xfinity deal kind of frees them up to do. They can put all their assets, pull all their energy to the Cup Series side, and I think that'll be what's best for them going forward. But it's tough to see a legendary team like that have to close down one of their major operations. As a Roush fan, I hope that they can get things together. I hope to see them run up front a little bit more next year because, I have high hopes for that team. That's a team that has high hopes for themselves, I'm sure. Now, the other big thing I want to talk about in this episode is Daniel Suarez. He recently made some interesting comments to motorsport.com. In this article, Daniel Suarez bluntly says, "I never felt I had everything to win at Joe Gibbs Racing." Now, we already know, and it's already been confirmed, that Daniel Suarez is out from Joe Gibbs Racing. They are kicking him from that 19 car, which he's driven for the last 2 seasons. Martin Truex Jr., veteran, now a Cup Series champion, is going to be driving that car going forward. Suarez currently without a ride. He's been in talks with Stewart-Haas Racing to get that 41 car, now that Kurt Busch is supposedly going to Ganassi, but all that stuff has not been confirmed yet. It's just been highly reported. So Daniel Suarez is technically a free agent as this offseason begins. I'll tell you a little bit more about what Daniel Suarez said in the article in a second, but first I'll give you some backstory on his JGR career. He started in the Xfinity Series, driving that 19 car, had a couple of really good years, won the championship in 2016 as well as a couple races that year. Things were looking great for Suarez. He had good sponsorship support from Eris. The plan was to run another full-time Xfinity Series season, at least one more, until jumping into the Cup Series. But then right before the start of the 2017 season, we all remember Carl Edwards, who was driving the 19 car in the Cup Series side, surprisingly announced his sudden retirement. The obvious choice at that point was to bump Daniel Suarez into the Cup Series, into that 19 car. Eric Jones, the other top driver in JGR's Xfinity program, was already going to Furniture Row for a year, so really JGR's only option was to go to Daniel Suarez and bump him up to the Cup Series about a year early. Now obviously Daniel Suarez was not ready for this sudden change. Nobody thought he was. Joe Gibbs didn't even think that he was, but then things did not go well. He did not get much support from Joe Gibbs Racing early on. About a month into his rookie season, Dave Rogers, who had been the crew chief with Carl Edwards during his Championship 4 run the year before, suddenly announced that he was stepping away from full-time crew chiefing, and they replaced him with Scott Graves, who at that point was also a rookie crew chief. They paired up a rookie driver who was clearly unprepared, Daniel Suarez, and they paired him up with a rookie crew chief, Scott Graves, for the most of his rookie season. Suarez didn't win any races that year. He didn't make the playoffs. He did see pretty impressive improvement, I must say. Towards the end of the year, he actually looked like a fairly competitive car, as opposed to how he looked at the beginning of the season, but needless to say, his rookie season wasn't great. Now this year, his sophomore season, again with Scott Graves, I think a lot of the expectations were a little higher. I, for one, expect him to make the playoffs. I think a lot of people expected him to as well, but he didn't. Again, he came close to winning. He finished second at Pocono over the summer after winning the pole for that race, so he had speed at different times this year, looked better at certain points, but the improvement that we saw last year steadily throughout was not prevalent this year. It looked like he kind of flatlined, really didn't look like he was getting any better as the year went on. So this year was definitely a disappointing one for Suarez, probably made it easy for Joe Gibbs Racing to make the decision to move him out of the 19 car for Truex. All this stuff is of course talked about in this article that I'm referring to from motorsport.com, but now I'll look at some of the quotes from Suarez because he had some kind of candid things to say about Joe Gibbs Racing, who I guess is now his former employer. I mentioned how the crew chief left early into his rookie season. The exact quote from Suarez here, he said, "2 months after I got in, the crew chief left, the car chief left, engineers left, and a lot of things changed, and I did not like that." He's referring to, early in his Cup Series career when JGR basically overhauled that entire 19 team. Doesn't seem super fair to me to do that to a young driver and then expect him to perform the same way Carl Edwards did. Another quote from Suarez, he says, "I never felt like I had everything to win. Lots of people changes, but I've never had a winning team. I moved from Mexico to the United States to win, not just to race. JGR is a great team, but I felt like it was not my home. I felt like it was not the place to be to win races and maybe one day the championship. There was something inside me that said I needed a change." Now this all sounds kind of eerily similar to Joey Logano's story with Joe Gibbs Racing. Remember, he came into the Cup Series when he was 18 years old. It was the replacement at the time to Tony Stewart in that 20 car. Expectations were through the roof on Joey Logano. But if you remember, the few seasons he spent with Joe Gibbs Racing were not impressive at all. If you look at his first 4 seasons in the Cup Series, all with Joe Gibbs Racing, he only had 2 wins, and his highest points finish in any of those years was 16th. Clearly did not live up to the hype that Tony Stewart had left in that car before him. But then at the start of 2013, Joey Logano left and got a top ride at Team Penske, and we've seen how good he's been since then. In the now 6 full-time seasons he spent away from Joe Gibbs Racing, he has 19 wins, and obviously, if you watched the race just a few weeks ago, now has a Cup Series championship. Not saying you can directly compare Joey Logano to Daniel Suarez. I think it's fair to say that Joey Logano was more of a prospect growing up. The fact that he had a Cup Series ride at age 18 must mean that he was pretty good growing up. Daniel Suarez, however, is already in his mid-20s, a little old to be kind of in only his second, third full-time Cup Series season, but still, I think this is a comparison that can be talked about because it's clear that Joe Gibbs Racing the last couple years has not given Daniel Suarez the same equipment they've been giving Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Eric Jones, Matt Kenseth, whoever else has been in JGR. Now this is where the article wraps up by showing us this Daniel Suarez quote. He says, "What I can say is we will be in the NASCAR Cup on a good team. We're working on the last few details, but we'll be fine. I hope to be in a position to win races next year. I hope I can share everything with the people who follow NASCAR soon. I hope it's in December, not later in January." Clearly here I'm going to assume he's referring to the fact that he's working out a deal with Stewart-Haas Racing to drive a really good car in that 41 car. So this is where I think you can make a comparison. When Joey Logano was with Joe Gibbs Racing early in his career, they were not giving him the same equipment they were giving veterans Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin. With Daniel Suarez, first couple years in his Cup Series career with Joe Gibbs Racing, it's clear he's not getting the same support of veterans Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin. Both drivers, in this case Logano, went to a Ford team and immediately became really good. It looks like Daniel Suarez, highly likely he's also going to go to a Ford team. Not saying he's going to win 19 races over the next 6 years like Logano has, but I think he's going to improve. A lot of people are quick to label Daniel Suarez as a bust, and I don't think that's super fair, especially given more of the details we've seen in this article. I still think that despite some of these disadvantages, he should have made the playoffs this year. I mean, they let 16 guys in. You should be pretty close. Is Daniel Suarez a future NASCAR Cup Series champion? In my opinion, no, probably not. But he's a guy that could easily race for another 15 years and be a playoff contender for pretty much all of them. And I think if he gets the deal with Stewart-Haas done in the next few weeks, I think he'll be on a good track to make that happen. Anyway, not a lot else to say there. I thought you guys would enjoy hearing a little bit about that. I have high hopes for Daniel Suarez. I really like him. He is currently the only, and was the first and currently the only Mexican-born driver at NASCAR's top level. I know he has the skill to win races. And I just want to see him get the support that I think he deserves and that I think NASCAR needs him to get. Because let's be honest, if Daniel Suarez starts winning races, that's going to be huge for NASCAR's popularity internationally, especially with its Mexican fans. That would be great. That would be awesome to see. And I'm sure NASCAR wants that to happen. Anyway, you guys, that is my show. All I have to talk about today. A couple of interesting news and notes coming out the last several days. So thanks y'all for watching. As always, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, continue the conversations over there, or you can sponsor the show on Patreon, like Michael Harrison, Mentally Defective, Tice Moore, and Cameron James, and the rest of these amazing Patreon supporters. You too can become a supporter of the show and help me out directly if you check out that top link down below. Thanks a lot for doing that. I really appreciate it. Got some other videos in the works right now. School's wrapping up, finals and all that, but I still will have some Out of the Grooves this week, so keep an eye out for those. Any news that comes out, I will be on top of it, talking about it, giving you my thoughts, and I hope you guys enjoy. So thanks as always for the support. Really, really appreciate it. I'll see you guys again in just a few days. Bye-bye now.